Anya Parampil is not just a journalist, commentator. She's the author of Corporate Coup Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire, which may, Anya, have been a somewhat optimistic title. Would you like to address that point first? Is the U.S. empire ended, or is it currently running Venezuela? Anya is back, so let's go to her in the United States. Anya, I was asking, what's really happened in Venezuela? Trump is talking as if he's running the show there. Me, are claiming that the Chavista government and state is still in power in Caracas. Which of us is right and which of us is wrong?
I think you're absolutely correct, George, that this is a hybrid regime change that did not actually result in the collapse of the Chavista regime or even the regime that existed under Maduro. It simply swapped out the face or the head of state. And let's go back to that question you asked me before my audio wasn't working. You had mentioned my book, Venezuela, Corporate Coup Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. And whether or not I was preemptive or optimistic in declaring an end to U.S. empire in relation to Venezuela. And what I would say is what I focus on in the book is explaining how the U.S. empire is centered and based upon the status of the dollar as the world reserve currency, and how that status and that the dollar's reign is based primarily on the petrodollar and the fact that oil producing states trade and sell their oil in the dollar. And that's how it's been since the 1970s. But what I explain in the book is how as a result of U.S. sanctions and U.S. financial warfare, many powerful countries, including oil producing and consuming states, have begun trading their oil in currencies other than the dollar. And Venezuela is among those countries because the U.S. made the choice to literally cut Venezuela off from a supply of dollars, thinking that that would force its economy to collapse. What that actually did was encourage Venezuela to begin selling its oil in currencies like the ruble, in gold-backed loans, in the yuan, and trading with countries like China, Iran, Turkey. India was coming in and buying a lot of the oil after the United States attempted to strangle Venezuela by refusing to buy its crude. And so this was when, at the time when I wrote the book, definitely that world and that alternative multipolar order was more on an upswing. And it looked more positive at that point when I was writing in 2020, 2021, or 2022 even. And since then, things have certainly changed. The war in Gaza has really laid bare the sheer force and ugliness of this empire that we live under, and maybe has illuminated some complications in how we have traditionally viewed this empire. It's not just the United States. There is a sense, even in the United States, that we are occupied at the moment, and that we are linked with this bizarre genocidal state on the other side of the planet that actually apparently even has an interest in Venezuela. You had the prime minister of Israel, Netanyahu, naming Venezuela and Iran as the top targets here. And there's some pattern of the countries that resist this empire and also finding themselves at odds with Israel. But as of today, no, I don't believe that Trump and Maduro and Rubio are calling the shots in Venezuela, but that there's still a situation on the ground there that it's hard to judge.
If that's right, and I hope you're right, the whole, I don't know, braggadocio, the whole swagger of the U.S. on the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela and his wife is somewhat overblown, because if they haven't actually changed the regime, if they are not actually able to install a puppet, Machado or someone else, in the Miraflores, then all they've got is now a potential problem on their hand of Maduro in a New York courtroom. And I don't know, maybe the feminists will wake up to the monstrosity that that Celia is also in a New York jail, battered and bruised and injured, because she's the wife of Maduro. Maduro in court, this seems to me not that much of a prize. Could be a poison chalice for Donald Trump.
Yeah, especially if they don't get a conviction, which is very possible. I recommend everybody look at Max Blumenthal, my husband's analysis of the indictment against Maduro. He notes that the crimes that are alleged to have taken place appear to have not even taken place in U.S. jurisdiction. They all happened in Mexico, and they happened before the United States declared the drug gangs in Venezuela to be narco terror groups. So they basically created a legal pretext since Trump came into office in order to go and retroactively name all these crimes that were alleged to have happened 10 years ago and make it as part of this narco conspiracy that the Venezuelan government is apparently waging against the United States. Is absurd. So Maduro will get his chance to defend himself. And yeah, it doesn't really... I don't know if the U.S. is prepared for that, but I think from people watching on the outside, there are still, from the American side, there's this sense that it was a rah, amazing operation because it was pretty easy. No American service members came back in a body bag after going into Venezuelan territory and kidnapping their president. And so I think that's given this sense of success among even parts of the Trump base that have for all these years been positioning themselves as anti-regime change war. Now they're even pivoting to try to say that this is a success because, look, we went in, nobody died, the government's changed, and they probably believe Trump's narrative that we're just calling the shots in Venezuela now, but it's unclear. I mean, I'm sure that there is some incentive for the new government to play ball with the U.S. to a degree, but I don't understand from their perspective, then what is going to prevent the United States from coming in and doing this all over again if Delcy doesn't give them what they want? It's a very tricky situation.
It seemed to me, I said this on Sunday, I say it again now, there is no way that what happened could have happened, but for treason in the camp. It's not possible that 34 Cuban special forces could be killed by the U.S. without reply, without even inflicting a single casualty on the U.S. The Cubans must have been betrayed somehow, somewhere. They cannot have been killed in kinetic firefight with the U.S. That ratio of 34-0 just doesn't compute. It's not possible that the air defenses, Russian supplied, over Caracas could not hit a low-flying Black Hawk helicopter. The Somali resistance in sandals with Kalashnikovs brought a Black Hawk down. In the 1990s, it's not possible that the air defenses of Caracas could not identify and bring down American Black Hawks circling over the capital unless treason was involved. What's your take on that?
I certainly had the same reaction you did, George, and I can just say that I had the same questions. I mean, I think that was a natural reaction for anybody who was sitting in our shoes and looking in from the outside. My sources in Venezuela are adamant that what happened is that they were completely overwhelmed and unmatched, that they couldn't match the technology that the U.S. brought in order to jam all of their communications and all of their signals, unable to communicate with each other. and that they decided not to escalate because they didn't want the situation to unravel or for more people to die in that in that confrontation. So you can that's what I've been told. I think that they're going to have to make their case more vocally, or that they'll have to have some sort of investigation and present some narrative about what happened, because certainly from the outside it's very puzzling.
Well, as Che Guevara said, I have seen the graves of those who did not fight because they were afraid of dying. To say that you're not going to shoot a Black Hawk for fear that 10 Black Hawks will appear, or you don't want an escalation, is not just an absurdity in logical terms. It flies in the face of all the rhetoric that we have participated in and listened to in Venezuela over many years, decades, in fact. The anti-imperialism bristling in Caracas just doesn't square with, well, we didn't open fire because we didn't want to escalate. Neither does the lack of communication. If I'm a man with a gun and I see a US Black Hawk above me, I'm firing at it, whether I'm in communication with anybody else or not. It's more than highly suspicious. We have to face the fact that something happened in Caracas, that Maduro was offered up as a sacrificial lamb, as were the Cuban fighters, who, just like in Grenada, by the way, were the only people who fought the Yankee invaders, the men who were digging the tarmac for the airport in Grenada when Ronald Reagan invaded. The only people killed there were Cuban fighters who did their duty until the last moment. Somebody betrayed them. Somebody betrayed Maduro. I wonder how Maduro is feeling about that in New York right now.
I would love to know. And I would say that we're in this unique dynamic where the U.S. has a total incentive to say that this is mission accomplished, this is done, Delcy is doing whatever we want. We had the CIA all over them and we infiltrated and it's over, because I think Trump wants to be able to move on from this and declare mission accomplished. Now, on the Venezuelan side, they have the incentive to say that that's not the case and that there's full unity behind Delcy and that this was somehow possible because the U.S. technologically overwhelmed us. And now, unfortunately, because that's the narrative, I think there are some in the United States that are going to look at that and say, well, then why shouldn't we go further? All these people who warned us that they would fight back were wrong. So why shouldn't we just go in and take the oil? And I think that's dangerous too, because basically what my sources in Venezuela say is, well, we dare them to put boots on the ground and then we'll see how this plays out. But if that's, the US can wage kinetic warfare indefinitely. So you can't just bet on your only line of defense being boots on the ground, man-to-man combat. And that's pretty much the read on the situation that I'm getting. It's that Trump would like to move on from this. But at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. Are they going to lift the sanctions and suddenly begin dealing with Delcy? And if that happens, will there be an upswing in the economy that she gets the benefit and it's kind of like what we're seeing in Syria now, where all the people who advocated for sanctions against that country for so long now are advocating that for them to be lifted so that the new government can experience the boon of participating in commercial life with the West once again. And I would say, George, don't you think that these two cases feel very similar, the Syrian Venezuelan case, in the sense that neither moment when either government fell was the most difficult or dangerous moment that either government faced in this long period of hybrid warfare? Things were stable in Syria, and then suddenly we find out that there's been a run on the country and Assad's gone. situation in Venezuela with the economy and with the streets, with violence in the streets, was much more unstable in past years. And why suddenly the government just fell in one night, or at least Maduro was removed in one night. It feels as though I said on the Gray Zone, as if the empire or someone comes up and puts a card on the table, and somehow that is how the deal is done. It's not. It wasn't an actual product of a real military or financial threat. It just seemed so sudden to me.
Yes, the two issues are intimately linked. They're very close in chronology. Also, it's easy to forget how recently the Syrian government fell, and almost fell again this week. The self-appointed president, Ashara, was hit by gunfire in Damascus this week. He's not seriously wounded, but he might be the next time. So these are, of course, turbulent and tumultuous times. Let's move on, Anya, if you will. I'm asking in the poll tonight, who's next? And we've got plenty to choose from. But the one that concerns me in particular the most, because of my long association with it, is Cuba. I was watching the revolting, repugnant Lindsey Graham on the aircraft with Donald Trump. He was visibly aroused at the possibility that Cuba is now in trouble. Your comments on that?
Cuba has been hanging on for years, and Venezuela being in the position that it did helped Cuba a lot. I think it depends on whether or not this Venezuelan government is fully abandoning its place in the region or not. And I think it goes back to the question of, has there been regime change? If Chavismo is still in power in Venezuela, then I think they can still maintain assistance or relationship with Cuba. But I think Cuba, it's just a much more difficult situation, what people there face. And it would take probably less in some degrees to tip the scales there in favor of regime change. But at the same time, the Cubans are so disciplined and have been resisting for this long. I think that if anybody's going to hang on, it's them, because they've just, if they were going to fall before, if they hadn't fallen yet, it's hard to see how just one change of face in Caracas is going to make or break the Cuban regime. But I worry about Iran, because I think that's where the U.S. is going to turn up the heat and apply pressure in the coming weeks. I think that's clear. I think they're happy to watch Cuba just teeter and suffer, but they're going to go in with force, I think, and try something with the Iranians.
How's this all playing in Peoria, in New York, in Washington? How has it affected the standing of Trump and his current in U.S. politics? The midterms coming up in November, be with us before we know it. If Trump is defeated in November, he will be impeached, as he himself said this week. How does it all affect U.S. politics?
I think it depends on the immediate future of how things play out in Venezuela. Because if Delcy is to face a coup, if there's some sort of instability, if the country collapses, if there's war, if there's infighting, then this will be seen as another Iraq war style failure. And that could happen in the coming months, or it could happen years from now as the U.S. pushes and turns up the heat. And only then will people that are now currently viewing this operation as a success, only then will they say that they got it wrong. Because right now, I think if things stabilize, if they lift sanctions and the economy improves, then people might actually, from the and I'm not saying that this is the correct interpretation, but I'm saying that the American public might look at that as a job well done. They got the guy that they wanted out, and things are stable. All of the people that warned about there being some crazy Iraq-style crisis in our hemisphere were lying. And again, it's they might not understand that Chavismo didn't fall and that the regime is still in place. And I even saw one reporter an anchor with CBS complaining to Marco Rubio that they didn't go in there and grab everyone. I mean, that's how some Americans are criticizing this operation in the mainstream media. They said, why didn't you go get Diosdado Cabello? How come Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president under Maduro, is even allowed to take office? So if that gives you an idea of where things are, it's pretty depressing.